Most people believe that if they want to stay on someone's mind, they need to stay visible at all times. They think constant messages, frequent check-ins, and always being available will keep the connection alive. But in reality, nonstop attention doesn't create desire, it creates comfort, and comfort quickly turns into familiarity. When something is always present, the mind stops reaching for it. There's no anticipation, no wondering, no emotional pull. Absence, when done with confidence and self-respect, does the opposite. It creates space, and in that space, curiosity is born. When you step back instead of leaning in, a shift happens inside a man's mind. He notices the change before he understands it. The silence feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliarity triggers thought. He starts replaying conversations, rereading moments, and questioning what changed. This isn't manipulation, it's psychology. The human mind naturally focuses on what it doesn't fully have access to. When attention is removed, the brain fills the gap by thinking, imagining, and wondering. That mental activity is what turns simple interest into fixation. Constant attention tells a man that access to you is guaranteed. Guaranteed access removes urgency. There's no reason for him to reflect, adjust, or pursue because he knows you'll still be there regardless of effort. Absence quietly challenges that assumption. It introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is powerful. It forces him to evaluate his position in your life. He begins to wonder whether he still matters, whether he did enough, whether he misread your level of interest. Those questions keep looping because they don't have immediate answers. Absence doesn't mean disappearing out of anger or playing games. It means reclaiming your time, your focus, and your emotional energy. When you stop initiating every interaction, you allow the dynamic to breathe. You're no longer filling every silence or rescuing every pause. That restraint signals confidence. It tells him that your world doesn't stop waiting for a response. A man is deeply affected by a woman who doesn't orbit around him, but instead moves in her own direction. Curiosity grows when patterns break. If you were always available before, your sudden shift toward independence feels noticeable. He may not say it out loud, but internally, he feels the loss of control over the rhythm of the connection. He doesn't know when he'll hear from you or what version of you he'll encounter next. That unpredictability isn't chaos, it's intrigue. It makes him pay attention in ways he didn't when everything was familiar and easy. When absence is paired with dignity, it amplifies attraction. You're not asking for reassurance or demanding clarity. You're allowing him to experience the consequences of reduced access. That experience pushes him to reflect on how he treated you, how much effort he put in, and whether he took your presence for granted. Reflection is the birthplace of realization, and realization only happens when there's space to think. A man thinks most about a woman when he's unsure of where he stands with her, not because she's confusing, but because she's no longer over-explaining herself. Absence removes the safety net of constant validation. It places the responsibility of action back on him. If he wants connection, he has to initiate it. If he wants reassurance, he has to earn it. That internal pressure keeps his mind engaged, replaying possibilities, outcomes, and missed chances. The more you resist the urge to fill the silence, the louder the silence becomes in his mind. Every moment you choose not to reach out becomes a moment he feels your absence. That absence turns into thought, and thought turns into emotional investment. What once felt optional starts to feel important. What once felt secure begins to feel fragile. And in that fragile space, curiosity deepens into attachment. Silence has a way of speaking directly to the mind without ever using words. When you stop explaining yourself, stop reacting to every message, and stop filling the empty spaces, something unusual happens. A man begins to listen to his own comfortable, and comfort rarely inspires deep thought. But when certain parts of you remain undisclosed, when your life isn't fully narrated in real time, interest transforms into curiosity. Curiosity is not passive. It actively pulls attention back to you again and again. A man thinks more about what he cannot fully understand than what he already knows. When you don't reveal every emotion, every plan, or every reaction, you create unanswered questions. Those questions don't disappear just because they're unspoken. They linger. He wonders what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and what matters most to you. That wondering turns into mental replay. He goes over interactions, searching for clues, trying to connect dots that were never clearly drawn. Oversharing kills intrigue. When you explain every mood, justify every decision, and narrate every detail of your day, you remove the space where attraction grows. Mystery thrives in that space. It's not about being secretive or dishonest. It's about being selective. When you choose what to share and what to keep for yourself, you signal self, control, and self-worth. That selectiveness makes him feel like access to you is earned, not granted by default. Mystery also creates emotional tension, and tension keeps attention alive. When a man doesn't fully know where he stands, his mind stays alert. He pays closer attention to your words, your tone, and your behavior. He becomes more observant because he wants to understand you better. That heightened awareness keeps you present in his thoughts even when you're not around. The less predictable you are, the more memorable you become. Predictability brings comfort, but it also brings complacency. Mystery disrupts routine. If he can't anticipate your next move or reaction, he can't take you for granted. He doesn't know when he'll hear from you or what version of you he'll encounter next. That uncertainty isn't chaos, it's intrigue. It keeps him mentally engaged because his mind prefers puzzles over finished pictures. When you maintain mystery, you allow your presence to linger. Instead of flooding his world with constant updates, you give him moments to miss you. Missing someone requires space. Without space, absence can't be felt, and without absence, desire fades. Mystery uses that space wisely. It allows emotions to stretch, curiosity to deepen, and imagination to take over. A woman who carries mystery doesn't rush to prove her value. She doesn't seek validation by explaining herself or demanding reassurance. Her calmness signals that she knows who she is and where she stands. That quiet confidence invites fascination. A man becomes curious about her boundaries, her standards, and her inner world. He wonders what it takes to truly know her, and that wondering keeps his thoughts circling back. Mystery also protects your energy. When you don't reveal everything, you avoid emotional exhaustion. You're no longer performing or overextending to keep someone interested. Instead, interest grows naturally because it's fueled by curiosity rather than constant effort. The less you chase attention, the more attention follows. The mind is drawn to depth it hasn't explored. When you remain slightly out of reach emotionally, you invite exploration. He doesn't feel overwhelmed by information or pressured by intensity. Instead, he feels intrigued. He wants to uncover more, understand more, and experience more. That desire keeps you alive in his thoughts because unfinished stories are harder to forget than stories that have already been told. Focusing on yourself is one of the most powerful ways to stay on someone's mind without saying a word. When your energy is directed toward your own goals, your own happiness, and your own growth, it sends a silent message that your life is full and complete. There is no need for validation or constant attention from anyone else, and that kind of independence is magnetic. People, especially men, are naturally drawn to someone who is thriving in their own world because it signals strength, confidence, and value. A man may not always consciously recognize it, but when a woman's focus is on herself, he can't help but notice her presence in ways he didn't before. When you immerse yourself in your passions, your career, your hobbies, and your friendships, you naturally create a life that is rich and vibrant. That richness makes you less predictable because you are not waiting around for someone else to complete your narrative. He starts thinking about you because your absence is not emptiness. It's full of meaning. He sees glimpses of your life through your posts, your actions, or stories he hears, and it sparks curiosity. A man begins to imagine what it would be like to be part of a life that is so well lived, and that imagination keeps you in his thoughts. Self-focus also communicates standards without a single word being said. When a woman is dedicated to her own growth, it tells a man that she values herself and expects to be valued in return. There is no need to spell it out. Actions speak louder than words. By investing your energy in yourself, you signal that your attention is not freely given and that it comes with intention. That intentionality is captivating because it makes him question his own priorities. He begins to reflect on whether he has been giving enough effort, whether he is truly attentive, and whether he deserves to be part of someone so committed to themselves. When you are centered on your own life, you naturally exude confidence. Confidence is magnetic in ways words cannot achieve. A confident woman doesn't chase, she attracts. She doesn't over-explain, she inspires curiosity. She doesn't adjust her behavior to fit someone else's expectations. She remains steady, and that steadiness draws attention. Men are more likely to think about a woman who is grounded in her own purpose because she represents stability, self-respect, and independence, all qualities that are subconsciously desirable. Self-focus also creates a sense of unpredictability. When a man sees that you are engaged in your own world, he doesn't know exactly what you're doing or who you are interacting with. That unpredictability sparks his imagination. He wonders who has your attention, what you're achieving, and what experiences you're having that he isn't part of. That wonder naturally pulls him into a mental space where he thinks about you more frequently because he wants to know, even subconsciously, how he fits into your life. Focusing on yourself also builds emotional resilience, which is incredibly attractive. When a woman is emotionally resilient, she doesn't rely on someone else to stabilize her mood or validate her feelings. That stability creates admiration because it highlights her independence. A man begins to think about her because her presence isn't just enjoyable, it's inspiring. He notices the way she handles challenges, celebrates successes, and maintains composure. That mental engagement doesn't fade because it's rooted in respect as much as attraction. Living a full and purposeful life also enhances your aura of mystery. When your attention is on yourself, your time becomes valuable. You are not constantly available, and that unavailability encourages reflection. He begins to replay moments he shared with you, wondering what you're doing, who you're seeing, and how he measures up. Your life becomes a story he wants to be part of, and the more engrossed you are in yourself, the more he is pulled into thinking about you without realizing it. By prioritizing your goals, your passions, and your well-being, you silently assert your worth. You demonstrate that you are someone who is complete on your own, which naturally commands attention. The more he recognizes your dedication to yourself, the more he contemplates your presence and your importance in ways he never could when you were constantly available. He begins to understand that a life like yours is rare, and rare things are always remembered. Standards are the quiet language of self-respect, and they speak louder than any explanation ever could. When a woman knows her worth and refuses to settle for less than she deserves, she communicates a message that no words can fully capture. Standards set the tone for how others are allowed to treat you. They create invisible boundaries that guide behavior, and when a man recognizes these boundaries, he begins to think about you more deeply because he understands that access to your attention and affection is not automatic. Your standards create value because they show that you are selective, intentional, and confident in yourself. A man who respects his own desires is naturally drawn to someone who respects herself. When a woman demonstrates that she has non-negotiables in her life, it forces reflection. He begins to evaluate his own behavior, asking whether he is meeting the standards she sets, whether he is showing up in the ways she expects, and whether he is worthy of her energy. That evaluation keeps you in his mind because it is ongoing. Every choice he makes is measured against your quiet expectations, and those expectations become a mental benchmark he cannot ignore. Standards also communicate strength without conflict. There's no need to argue about how you should be treated or to constantly remind him of your value. When you hold firm, your consistency speaks volumes. A man notices when a woman does not compromise her self-respect for temporary comfort or convenience. That observation triggers thought because it challenges him to rise to meet the level of commitment, attention, or respect that she naturally commands. It forces him to measure himself not against others, but against what he perceives as the value of what he could lose. The way standards shape attention is subtle yet profound. By refusing to tolerate behaviors that don't align with your worth, you cultivate an aura of exclusivity. A man cannot take your presence for granted because he knows it is not guaranteed. That awareness engages his mind repeatedly. He may replay interactions, wondering whether he has crossed a line, whether he has missed an opportunity to impress, or whether he has underestimated what you represent. That mental engagement grows stronger because your standards create tension between desire and access. Maintaining standards also encourages self-accountability in a man. When he sees that you won't accept less than what you deserve, he begins to examine himself, his intentions, and his effort. He starts to consider whether he is providing enough, doing enough, or being enough to merit your attention. That kind of reflection is powerful because it is internally motivated. He doesn't need to be told. He begins thinking about you naturally as he measures his own actions against the invisible framework you've set. Standards elevate emotional value. When you consistently honor your boundaries, you cultivate respect, admiration, and curiosity. A man thinks about you because he wants to understand the woman who holds herself with integrity. Your standards create an invisible magnet, pulling attention toward you not through drama or desperation, but through calm authority. He begins to notice patterns, consistency, and principles in your behavior, all of which deepen his contemplation and mental engagement. Holding firm to your standards also protects your energy, which is inherently attractive. A woman who is selective about where she invests her time and emotion demonstrates that her attention is valuable. He notices the difference between moments when you are fully present and moments when you choose not to engage. That contrast sparks thought because it highlights your discernment, your independence, and the rarity of your focus. He begins to consider what it would take to earn that focus consistently, and in doing so, you occupy a permanent space in his mind. Standards are not just about restriction. They are about direction. They guide how a man perceives you, how he measures his effort, and how he prioritizes his attention. By living according to your principles, you show that your life and your energy are not to be taken lightly. A man can't help but think about someone whose presence is meaningful and whose absence carries weight. Your unwavering commitment to your own standards makes you memorable, magnetic, and impossible to overlook. Choosing yourself is the ultimate act of empowerment, and it is one of the most powerful ways to remain unforgettable in a man's mind. When you prioritize your own needs, desires, and growth, you demonstrate that your happiness does not depend on anyone else. That level of independence commands attention without a single word. A man begins to think about you not because of what you say or do for him, but because he notices the strength and completeness in your life. When you put yourself first, you create a magnetic energy that draws people in while simultaneously filtering out those who are not aligned with your value. Choosing yourself means refusing to compromise your principles, your time, or your peace for the sake of pleasing someone else. When a woman does this consistently, it communicates that she is intentional about her choices and discerning about who deserves her energy. A man recognizes this subtle power even if he doesn't immediately articulate it. He begins to reflect on the ways he may have underestimated you, ignored your worth, or taken your presence for granted. That reflection is the foundation for deeper thought and increased mental focus, because he begins to understand that your attention is not a given. It is earned through respect, effort, and alignment with your values. When you choose yourself, you also cultivate resilience. Life throws challenges at everyone, and the way you navigate them speaks volumes. A man notices a woman who maintains her poise, continues to pursue her dreams, and upholds her boundaries even in difficult situations. He may not realize it immediately, but over time, he begins to replay moments when you demonstrated strength, independence, and self-reliance. These memories anchor you in his mind not as someone who is dependent on him, but as someone whose presence enhances life because of her completeness, not despite it. Choosing yourself also introduces a form of scarcity that naturally captures attention. When you are fully engaged in your own growth, your time and energy are no longer available at every moment. That unavailability is not about playing games. It's about protecting what is precious to you. A man begins to notice the gaps in communication, the pauses, the moments when you focus on your life instead of his expectations. Those pauses spark curiosity, reflection, and even admiration. He starts to think more about you because the mental effort of understanding your value becomes compelling and rewarding. Self-prioritization also signals that you have high standards for relationships and interactions. When you choose yourself, you are sending an unspoken message. I will not settle for less than I deserve, and I expect reciprocity in attention, effort, and respect. A man cannot ignore that message because it frames every interaction he has with you. He begins to assess his own behavior, wondering if he is meeting the level of respect and engagement that aligns with your worth. That self-assessment keeps you in his thoughts continuously, because now your presence carries weight beyond surface-level attraction. By choosing yourself, you also embody confidence in its purest form. Confidence is magnetic, not because it demands attention, but because it radiates authenticity and self-assurance. A man begins to think about you because he senses that your life is complete without him, and yet there is a space for him if he proves worthy. That tension between independence and accessibility is irresistible. It makes him mentally engage with the idea of you constantly, imagining what it would take to match your energy, meet your standards, and earn your focus. Choosing yourself also fosters a life of purpose and fulfillment that naturally draws attention. When you are living intentionally, pursuing goals, cultivating passions, and nurturing your well-being, Your presence becomes more than just a personality. It becomes an experience. He remembers the way you laugh, the way you speak, the energy you carry, and he cannot help but think about you repeatedly. The moments he spends observing, reflecting, and imagining are a direct result of the completeness you have created in your own life. Ultimately, when you consistently choose yourself, you teach a man to value you without having to tell him. He notices your boundaries, your focus, your confidence, and your standards, and all of these elements coalesce into a lasting impression. Your self-prioritization ensures that your attention is not taken for granted, your presence is felt deeply, and your absence is profoundly noticed. In choosing yourself, you do not just live for your own fulfillment. You command attention, respect, and thought in a way that is undeniable and permanent.